I realized that we needed to get back into this subject. I haven't done this subject in almost 2 years, and going through my archives, I realized that I did it, and going over it, I realized that there's still some information that does need to be covered in terms of this subject, which is homosexuality and effeminization of African males or black males because of what's going on in society and historically speaking. A lot of us have the historical approach of it very twisted, and I'm seeing that now because we knew where to put it in historical perspective years ago, whereas now there's a lot of confusion going on. That's going to be cleared up tonight. In order for you to really define homosexuality in its context, you have to go back historically speaking. You have to go back historically speaking as of when this situation first actually occurred. And that's what I'm about to do. When you go back to the Ptolemy era, which is we now know as, we've been known as well as the Greek and Rome complexity or image of ancient Egypt when it began to become more Romanized, it began to become more Greekized. Prior to the invasion of the Romans, or prior to the constant migration period of the Hyksos, of the Shepherd Kings, of the Europeans, of the Assyrians, they were in their own European land. All right, they had a culture. Now, it wasn't a culture as advanced, nowhere near our culture from Ethiopia, Ta-Seti, Nubia, Meroe, nowhere near what ancient Kemet was, ancient Tamare, ancient Tanun, ancient Egypt. Their culture consisted mostly of male-on-male sexuality. This is in Rome. This is historically speaking. It was very illicit sodomy. This is very strong going on here. This is first account historically speaking. This occurred first. I have to say this. This occurred first in Europe before it was anything going on within Black African culture. Sodomy, male on male sex, whether it's anal or oral. All right. When you're dealing with there's one saying that every European knows because they had European and Roman armies during that time period. And there's a saying that they always said. They said that the best soldiers are the ones you sleep with. Okay? They spent months and months during war becoming more more familiar with their male counterpart or their male intimate partner. All right? These were Roman European males. All right? The only reason they would deal with a female is to have a child. Prior to that, they had no use for a woman. Okay, these are white people. All right? And they loved their male counterpart. This is I'm giving you a historical account. This is reality here. They had a saying in order to make because they were recruiting soldiers at very early ages in their culture. It would range from 13 to 19. The oldest would be 19 years old. They would start at 13, and it was a practice that, if any of you remember the movie Life with Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence, Bernie Mac, he made a saying called it called it pitching woo. This is a European culture. It was a European saying. It was called pitching woo. What they would do with what the European males or the Greek males, Roman males would do with a 13-year-old child, he had to be a certain height. And He had to at least be, if I'm 5'10", he had to at least be 5'9", 5'8", 5'10". He had to vary in that. He couldn't be too short, all right? And in order to really break him in physically, they had to be the same height. Otherwise, it would look uneven, sodomizing him from the back in that way. Okay? This is reality here. Okay? This is historical facts. All right? This is when you look up this word, it doesn't start in Africa, it doesn't start in Ethiopia, it doesn't start anywhere in Black Africa at all. It starts with Europe. It starts with Romans. It starts with Caucasians. All right? This is a vast culture. Homosexuality was a very vast culture in Europe prior to them coming in to or trying to miscegenate themselves in ancient Egypt and trying to, because they were, of course, the first shepherd kings or shepherd prisoners. All right? That practice of male-on-male sex first started in Europe. I have to keep reiterating this. All right? In terms of the female, before we go back into the male, but just sideline into the female, they said that female-on-female sex, they said originally, historically speaking, started on an island called Lesbo. All right? That is actually incorrect because they were trying to tie any way they can to connect it next to African women. All right? But in reality, the term Lesbo was really connected to, greetings, brother, really to women practicing the art of fellatio or oral sex. It had nothing to do with women, female on female sex, okay? Because in reality, when two genders come together to have sex, they cancel each other out because there's no carrying over, there's no population, there's no copulation, there's no rejuvenation. It's just nothing. If if two X's come together, which is two women coming together to perform an act, they cancel each other out because there is no reproduction going on. Okay? Same thing for the two Y's, two males. It makes no sense to come together because you're not producing anything. All right? Now, when you deal, but matter of fact, online right now, they're trying to pass this story, but they dated themselves wrong. They're trying to pass a story that Haru and Satuk had a homosexual relationship. This is online. All right? That is also debunked because the date that they gave for this goes back, again, to the Ptolemy stories. You have to understand, when the Ptolemy era started, the whole complexity and mindset change of ancient Egypt. All right? Not just the physical features, the culture began to change. So the problem is when they dated it to Ptolemy, that let me know, because I study history, that let me know that was a point when they began to change a lot of the stories that went on pre-dynastically. They were trying to find a way to not deal with homosexuality from just a European standpoint. They wanted to tie it into Africa. Okay, that's why now that they're propagating this story of homosexuality starting in ancient Egypt first, which is totally incorrect. Okay, you have to even further go down now, just to let you know, if you find anything dealing with sodomy, male on male sex going on in ancient Egypt, it would only start in post-Ptolemy. Pre-Ptolemy, whether it's First Kingdom, Second Kingdom, pre-dynastic, there is no physical evidence of male-on-male sex, whether it's anal, whether it's oral. None of it, there's no historical evidence whatsoever. Okay? Fast-forwarding into slavery, into our bondage. One of the main things that slave masters would do to the men was sodomize them. Whether you got Mandingo tribes from Ghana, Nigeria, and parts of Senegal. This is found in my father Dr.York's book, Our Bondage, where they would take African males and sodomized them. You know, this was something that they wanted to do. They didn't just take the women, they took the men as well. All right? They did these things to them coming here, and they did these things to them while during the time of slavery in the Americas. And it was very big going on. It was a very huge situation going on like this in the parts of Brazil as well as the West Indies. It's one of the main reasons why they despise it to this day. As well as when they began to colonize Africa, they were doing the same thing in Africa. That's why they over there despise homosexuality and sodomy over there as much as they do right now. That's why they're trying to push that culture out. That's why I just think to yourself, understand this, and ask yourself this one question. If Barack Obama is so worried about world affairs, why would he push a homosexual culture in Africa rather than trying to end famine and hunger? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Of course, we already know, or we should already know, that the feminist movement had their hands in his pocket, $30 million to push certain athletes so that, you know, black people, African people in America today will be more acceptable of homosexuality in their culture. But going back into slavery, this was something that was going on again in the West Indies, going on in the Americas, and going on in Brazil, as well as when they began to colonize Africa. So when it comes up in your genetics, you can thank the European for this. Because if someone's doing something to you like this, it's becoming a part of your genetics. Because if this European is sodomizing you as a slave, and you take that DNA that's inside of you, that's becoming a part of your DNA, then you pass that defiled DNA onto a woman, that's going to become a part of not just your DNA, but her DNA. So the likeness of that European is not just in yourself, it becomes a part of her as well. And whatever you populate or copulate out of, it's going to come into that child as well and into your genetics, so on and so forth. Okay? When you're dealing with effeminization, because they're very much hand in hand, when you're dealing with effeminization, we always refer back to the Wiley-Lynch effect or the Wiley-Lynch letter. And the Wiley-Lynch effect or Wiley-Lynch letter is dealing with a very good part or a portion that a lot of people, when they quote that letter, they seem to forget this part where we have to make the woman independent of the African male. And how we do that, we put one over the other. We begin to, number one, we begin to beat the African male and have his children watch this, so that subconsciously and psychologically she begins to look at him as less than. So she no longer sees him as a protector and a provider for a situation. You know, he's in slavery anyway, nothing he can do in the first place, but that's a psychological effect that after this, you know, he's no longer the provider, I'm not a provider for that child. So that's maiming him in that way, okay? And that's taking the masculinity, you're basically ripping the masculinity away from this man, and you're effeminizing him. You know, he's no longer man anymore. He's no longer what makes him what he is. It's just he's nothing. So he becomes the opposite. He becomes effeminate. All right. I'm just dealing with Europeans bringing bringing in homosexuality into African culture, and you're fast forwarding, going all the way down to now, where you're seeing manifestations of this. You know, because you have points, of course, times in our genes now where you're going to come up with homosexuality, and there's different ways homosexuality as well comes up in our genetics, whether it be through molestation, because a child can be molested at certain points. And this is, again, these thought processes come from what happened to us with the European years ago. You know, you have the prison culture, and the prison culture is a very effeminized homosexual culture. You know, there's sexually transmitted diseases and HIV running rampant in prisons all over the world, not just in this country, but all over the world. All right? And you have times where, again, it may come up in your genetics, but that is due in part to this European forcing his defiles or his regressive genetics onto us. Not the European, I mean the Caucasus or the, as you want to say, white person or the Temhu. So we're now in a state when we're dealing with black culture where they have now pushed, of course, and I'm going to get into these black athletes, but just the singers. You got the Frank Oceans of the world, who at one point, when if a homosexual, if a black male homosexual, if he was homosexual, he wouldn't come out with his business. All right. When you see a lot of these different black entertainers coming out, quote unquote coming out, this is was known as a agenda, propaganda. You take the Frank Oceans of the world, you take the Sean Collins, the basketball player, you take the football player that just came out. You have an MMA or UFC fighter. He was black as well. That came out. So this is propaganda, and this starts from the feminist movement. The feminist movement put a lot of money into Barack Obama's pocket. Okay, and so they decided they wanted him to be the one to push homosexuality onto our people. Greetings, family. And so they wanted this to be pushed upon our people because they wanted us to welcome this type of act on our people. And again, historically, homosexuality, male on male, female on female, did not start in Africa. It started in Europe first. Okay? When you're seeing a lot of these black entertainers, you got the Omar Epps running around with a dress on. You got, what else? You have the Diddy's running around with a dress on. Can someone get to a quiet place? Yeah, can someone get to a quiet place? That got real loud. Yeah, just go ahead and mute yourself. All right. You have so many different phases. You got the Diddy's wearing a dress. You have different rappers wearing dresses. The Kanye's. These are things that they're pushing onto our males so that they can be more effeminized. And it's not a natural thing for an African woman to look at a man wearing a dress as an attraction. So why would they want us to take this type of culture on if it's not natural to who we are as a people? Okay. Let me rewind a bit. Pre-dynastic Egypt. I just asked the question, but I'm going to go back into that. But let me just rewind and go back to pre-dynastic Egypt because you have he and hermaphrodite genes. Okay, the first he and hermaphrodite gene or hermaphrodite gene that was confirmed. This is actually post-dynastic was Akhenaten or Akhenaten, who was a hermaphrodite, both male and female sex organs. The difference is, when you deal with European culture, from that perspective, they're trying to say that he was a homosexual or he was gay. He wasn't homosexual or gay. He just had both male and female sex organs. That was all. Okay? They're trying. We're also pushing that certain women in ancient Egypt was also Queen Hatshepsut, to be more specific, was also a lesbian. It was confirmed that she had a situation with a woman, but that was based on psychological. It was a psychological situation that she was going through at that time. So she decided to she decided to carry that on. She decided to pursue this situation with another woman, but this situation was not normal. It wasn't something this was a 1 percentile situation. When they were trying to, of course, when you're going with let's go back pre-dynastic just to clear this up. When you're going back to pre-dynastic times of ancient Egypt and you want to deal with the he and hermaphrodite gene, this is a 1 percentile situation. This wasn't something that was just a large tribe of them. When you want to deal with male and female counterparts, or you want to go to the Namos or the Agdad or the Khemenu, of course, they manifested as pairs, male and female, as we know as nun, nunet, ket, 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 het, he, het. All right? But when you deal with the hidden hermaphrodite gene, this is something that occurred every once in a while within our genetics. And there was a time where we were trying to breed that gene out, okay? And we successfully did it, but it wasn't to the success that we wanted it to as scientists pre-dynastically. So at certain times, you had defiled genetics. You had defiled situation where you had a defect that would manifest itself, where it would be a man that every once in a while would think from a woman mind state, and then you have a woman that would think from a male mind state. But this wouldn't make them want the same sex. They were just chemically imbalanced. Okay? That's what that was. It wasn't that, okay, I'm thinking like a woman, so I want to have a man. No, it was just a chemical imbalancement. All right? Now, fast forwarding again into our time. They have to effeminize the male because, again, as our sister, Dr. Welsing, Dr. Francis Welsing says, the biggest threat to this society is a strong, masculine African male. All right? And the woman, if I eliminate that male, I eliminate that children, because the spark of life is coming from that male as well as that woman. She holds at least 65 to 70% of the sperm cell, but you need that extra spark from that man, otherwise you get no children. Okay, you have no masculinity. Of course, as well, another factor that plays a part in effeminizing males is there is no men around a lot of times in these households, and we know that because of what's going on in the society of not allowing a man to have a job, pushing a lot of men in these prisons, so many different factors. So it's not something that is our fault. We are just at war with this European, with this oppressor, and because of that war, you're getting casualties of that war, and one of the main casualties is parts of homosexuality. Okay? Does anyone have any questions or anything else they wanted me to clarify for them?
I got a question.
Go ahead.
Could you clarify? I hear some brothers. Well, I just hear chatter. I don't want to say I'm agreeing with it, but our ancestors. And I don't know too much knowledge about it, so let me get to the question. This effeminization going on. You mentioned Omar Epps with the little skirt on or dress, whatever you want to call it, or you see what's the other brother, the Most Def.
Right.
I see some people try to tie it back to our ancestors. I don't know the name of the clothing, where you might see some pictures of some men with what is perceived to be a skirt, but I know that was not the proper name for it. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Okay. Well, let's say you look at Most Def. I've seen the picture you're talking about. That was actually African attire. Right. Now, if you take Omar Epps, that was a skirt. The picture with Kanye West, that's a skirt. That wasn't no damn kilt. You take Diddy, that was a skirt. All these men, you got, who else? Snoop, skirts. You can see, it's matter of fact, the picture with Most Def, there was Africans standing next to him, basically confirming that, yes, this is African attire. But that was out of so many different rappers wearing dresses now, that was one. That was only one that was confirmed to wear African attire. The rest of those are skirts and dresses that men run around here wearing. So, right. No. Go ahead, brother.
But if you look at some pictures of some ancient Kemites or whatnot, it's like sometimes they be in the stands, they may have their shirt off, they have some type of it's some I heard some people, I'm not saying that, but some people assume that it's like some type of skirt or something, and they say our ancestors wore skirts, but they wasn't homosexual. You know what I'm talking about?
No, they wore attire. No, they wore attire. They wore attire. It wore ancient Commission attire. That was, but you gotta look at how far that dress is. Not dress, it's crazy. Look at how far that attire is going past a certain part of their leg. I mean, and then also looking how it's designed. It wasn't designed like what you see walking around right now. They can't compare what you saw on the walls of Rahubat, what you saw on the walls in different paintings and different carvings on the walls, and what the attire that they were wearing, as opposed to what you're seeing Diddy wearing or what you see Omar Epps wearing. What Omar Epps was wearing is completely a skirt. That's not what we were wearing in Africa. What you saw Diddy wearing was a skirt. They're trying to, a lot of these brothers now, brothers and sisters now that are walking around making these comparisons have already been, propaganda's already been in their brain. They've already been affected by it. And it's like, regardless of how far people are saying that they're not under the spell, if you're falling for certain propaganda, you're under the spell. If you're allowing someone else to push propaganda within the media and within online trying to say that, okay, in Kemet they're wearing dresses, you're an idiot. Because you can't tell that, because there's, matter of fact, AEO attire. AEO attire was attire. I had AEO attire on. That wasn't a dress. The way it was designed, it was meant to be attire. And it was meant to be for not just males to wear, but for the female to wear. We knew what a skirt was. If you anywhere you went and you bought it, you would look at it and say, okay, we had enough common sense to differentiate between AEO attire and a skirt. A lot of these brothers around here walking around with skirts, and a lot of our people have been trained to accept it. So they're going to find any means they can to connect it to some form of African situations. It's ridiculous. People got to learn how to stop doing that because they know better. But a lot of these people now, go ahead, bro.
Oh, Omar, it's safe to say that the skirt he had on, he had to go to a women's section to buy it. So that's women's clothes. All right, that's all I got to say.
Yeah, there's no problem. I've yet to see what he had on in a men's section in Fifth Avenue. They're probably going to put it in there now, but I have yet to see it anywhere where that thing looked like something. He had pants on after it or under it, and the skirt, it was a black skirt, so it looked like something that if he was a woman, he wouldn't have no pants on. He would just have on a short skirt on. You know, we got to get to a point where we got to start using some type of reasoning and some type of understanding as to what we see in front of us. It's ridiculous. You know, if you're willing to accept anything and not use historical fact to prove where homosexuality comes from, then you're willing to accept anything going on right now. You're willing to think that, okay, because a lot of people in conscious community have no idea what effeminization is. They have no idea what the effeminization culture symbolizes. It symbolizes the extinction and what they're going into right now, because again, my father Dr. York taught that we are at the fourth generation right now. We're at what's known as the fourth generation. We have been genetically bred out, first of all. The second problem is because there's a lot of homosexuality going on, running rampant now in our genes that's now manifesting because of the miscegenation of the European. We are now switching into what's called a minus birth rate. Okay, we over the years have been at a plus birth rate for years, meaning that we populated very strongly within our families. We deal with the European. He was always at a minus birth rate, low sperm count, small, very, the nutrients in his system was very lacking, problems, because of him being melanin recessant, within his gene pool, he was weak. So what he manifested most of the time in reality was retardation of Down syndrome, 47 chromosomes. So now you're seeing it within our genes, of course, retardation. And as well as homosexuality because of, again, mixing in or being mixed and being raped by this European. So they don't realize that the more, again, common sense, use right reasoning, the more homosexuals you have in a culture, less babies are being born. Thus, you're now lapping over into a form of genocide. Because if I have less children being born, I'm having less of a population. So you having in this country was known as population control, because the census originally, this is not separate from the subject. I'm not digressing, but this is connected to it. The census originally happened or was created after 1790, after the Haitian Revolution, okay? Because they wanted to, because we were at a 40 percentile in this country at that point, and they began to, in different ways, go from us being 40% to 12% population in this country, whether they decided to turn up the killings, whether it be through the slave codes and through slavery, whether it be just massive amounts of killings, rape, killings, hangings, castrations, and they decided, and they were able to bring down the 40 percentile to a 12% population, which is where we still reside between 12 and 13%, because they need to keep us at a 12 and 13%. That's why I say effeminization, and this is reality, not just what I say. This is factual. They have to have effeminization going because we're the ones that populate the earth more than anybody else on this planet. And in this country, they can't have more African people and less Europeans, because then they would be extinct. Okay, they will be pushed off. Again, if we didn't have them around within our system, or we didn't feed their system, they would dissipate. We have no need for the European or the Temhu, as we would say in Nuwaupu language, living filth. Okay, when you're dealing with effeminization, you're dealing with a culture that is meant to get us at and where we're going now into a minus birth rate. Again, that has to be reiterated. It has to be reiterated because we have to know what we're dealing with right now. Again, all this stems at a point where we are at a war with this European, and we have to recognize what's going on with our kids and what's going on with our males as well as our females. A lot of the situations you're seeing right now in the sisters culture that I mentioned earlier, what Queen Hatshepsut was a psychological situation. When you're looking at a lot of the stud culture, if you look at by reasoning, a lot of that comes within inner cities. That's not something that is an occurrence when you're dealing with black well-off neighborhoods. You mostly see that in the hood somewhere. So a lot of that is dealing with psychological situations. See, a woman can deal with a woman because she might feel that man emotionally is checked out. He might just want the sex and leave her alone. So she'll deal with the woman, but eventually she's going to want to be with a man. This is going to be cool for a little bit, but I need to be with a man. I need to be with my male counterpart, plain and simple. And that's usually how it ends up anyway. Okay? Does anyone have any questions? Okay, going even further. We have to be able to see things and use it from a right reasoning perspective when you're dealing with what's going on right now with our children. When you're not having any male counterparts around, this has to, again, be reiterated. When you do not have any male counterparts around and you have a lot of our male children, because, again, I talked about this on a Blog Talk Radio Friday night. A lot of our males, our young males, were neglected. When you're dealing with different eras in this country, from heroin era that's in the 70s, and you're dealing with the crack era that was within the 80s, where a lot of our men were being pushed in these prisons, having a lot of these problems where there were no males around. You having males being, male child being born, but there were no masculine principle teaching him, or just a presence of a male around, you're going to have a very effeminate male, because all he's going to have around him is a mother, grandmother, sister, aunt. This is reasoning. This is right reasoning. And when you're having a lot of feminine energy around you, you're going to feed off that feminine energy. Okay? You're going to feed from that, and that's going to shape the person you really are. Not saying that happens every single time. Okay? But generally speaking, that's also a factor to what attributes psychologically to a homosexual situation. Now, I've seen that, so I know that for a fact as well. So we have to put everything, we have to put this culture, homosexuality, which is clearly starts historically in Europe first, okay? Again, whenever you hear people talk about this, the first question you have to ask them is, historically speaking, where did homosexuality, male on male and female on female sex, start first? Because you got to realize, most of the time we don't talk to Europeans like that. We don't talk to Europeans even at our jobs. When we walk in the streets, where we're in their world, we don't talk to them like that. We're talking to each other. We're talking to another black person. So when they're coming at you with this type of stuff, ask them, question this information, and ask them, historically speaking, where did homosexuality start first? Okay? And if they give you this Horus and Satuk story or Set story of sodomy going on, and you ask them again, where, give me the date. You have to question this information because, number one, a lot of it, as I said earlier, started with, especially that specific story that started when the Ptolemy era changed the whole complexity of ancient Kemet, and they began to take on specific stories. It was no longer based on what oral history or what was being carved on the walls. It was that they just decided to change the whole culture around and began to mix in different types of practices, you know, and decided to say, well, okay, well, look, this is what we, you know, this didn't just start in Europe. This also started in Africa first as well, so they can leave it alone. But just look at the population of European males. There's more European males that are homosexual than there are black males that are homosexual. There's more European websites, and this is on what's known as the darknet. If you look up the darknet is a culture online. You can't, but the thing is, just to tell you about it, just to let you know this, if you go on the darknet tonight or tomorrow, whenever you use it, you can't stay on there very long because, of course, we know every website you get on is recorded. But anyway, when you get on the darknet, this is a culture that any white male, European male, they can find any black child they want. Any child in particular, but child specifically, they target black children for molestation and sodomy. Okay, they in their culture are trying to push pedophilia as an actual legalized culture. Okay, this is online. This is not something I made up. This is online. Okay, this European, by genetics and historically speaking, is a very vile individual. Okay, as I mentioned to you again, through our bondage, through when he came into Europe, through when he came into Black Africa, into ancient Kemet, with his ways of sodomy. Again, this all started with him first. When we're going into slavery and our bondage, you have a period where they were raping black males, black slaves, Mandingo slaves. Okay, and this was a concentrated effort. You could look at this, the movie Drum, played by Ken Norton. This was the prequel to Mandingo, when Ken Norton was having sex with a slave woman. The slave master decided to come in and try to have sex with him. This is in the movie. They pushed this within the movie. Okay? This European, again, when you're having molestation cases, there's more molestation cases going on in the European culture than there is in the male in the black male culture. It's like pretty much very few, if any. in our culture, but in their culture, it's very rampant, very rampant. Okay, that's why they had to create two different sets of the internet, because they want to go around and hide it because they don't want it to be publicized. You know, the government knows what's been going on for years, where, you know, you had the Aleister Crowleys going on with the child sex scandals. You know, and that's something he did for years, and everyone knows that he was doing it for years. You had the child sex things going on in the industry, in the music industry for years, the child sex sacrifices. These are all European men sodomizing little boys. And nowhere in there is there any black males doing any of this. But today, now they want to try to say that homosexuality, male on male, because if you define what homosexuality is, the definition of homosexuality is two people of the same sex having sex. That's all it is. It's not a culture. It's not a flag. It's not a hairstyle. It's not a tattoo. It's not a lip ring. None of these things. That is all other stuff that they adapted, and it's foolishness. That's all homosexuality is. Okay? This may make your stomach hurt. This may make you turn somewhere and feel uneasy. But truth is truth. You have to clarify things and put it in its proper perspective. Otherwise, you believe anything going on today. And because we are believing what's going on with us right now, we're starting to take on different people's cultures. We haven't, because I realize blacks have not had a culture of their own for years, hundreds of years. 500 years to be exact. So anything that black people are hearing right now, they're going to take on that mindset and say, well, if you're saying it, then I'll take it on. You know, that's a sleep mindset. That's ridiculous. Okay? Put things in a proper perspective, and that pushes away this homosexuality situation with African males out of your mind, and you'll be able to see the effeminization going on with our people. Does anyone have any questions or a statement as of what's been said?
Well, yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Because you mentioned about homosexuality coming from out of Europe or coming from the Caucasian race, how do you explain about Wu-Nuwaupu and his lover, his male lover coming from out of ancient Egypt?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's always been historically documented about those two being lovers coming from out of ancient Egypt. And if that was the case, then was that before or after the influence of Caucasians coming into ancient Egypt?
Okay, I actually looked that up. That because it's not just that one. You also had another that they said was documented. That one itself was actually, with further research, you'll find that was actually Akhenaten and Nefertiti, because what they showed was, as we know in Freemasonry, known as the 5 points of fellowship, the first, what's the word? When they embraced in that depiction, that was the first form of 5 points of fellowship. And Akhenaten was bringing Nefertiti up in a specific degree in the ancient Egyptian orders. And the headdress that Nefertiti was wearing, because the perception of it is that was a male, but in reality, that was actually a female. That was Nefertiti that was wearing a specific headdress for the ancient Egyptian order. And when you're dealing with a lot of these different stories, all these stories are post-Ptolemy. That's why I said ask for the date first. And they actually give a date for both the story that you give and the story that you mentioned, and also the story of another. It was two that they said was two males embracing each other on the 5 points of fellowship, and both of them, they're supposed to be half brothers. Again, and that one was thrown out because that was post Ptolemy.
Okay.
So when you're dealing with the one you mentioned with the mother and Khnum, that was in actuality that was actually Uncle and Nefertiti embracing because Uncle was bringing her up in the ancient Egyptian order. It was the 5 points of fellowship greeting, because they went to what you just said, and they said through further evidence and further research, they found out it wasn't a homosexual act going on. It wasn't anything like that going on. It was actually just an induction to a further degree of study in ancient Egyptian order.
So you're saying it's a form of initiation?
Yeah, that was just a further initiation within the order. That's all that was. Because I actually went along. I myself went along with that and thought that's where it started, but in reality, with further research, we find out that that wasn't true at all. That was just nothing but an induction.
Okay.
Mhm. Any more questions?
What would be like with the homosexuality and the into slavery? I mean, what would be the purpose of the Europeans or Caucasians? What would be their purpose in doing this to those Mandinka tribes? Or because I would think like their way of tying into the vine, meaning tying themselves into our genetics, but there's nothing really that how can you tie yourself into another man? So how is it possible? Like, what was their reasoning behind it? Was it just to excite themselves, or was it? I mean,
because they were attracted to what they saw. They were attracted to what they saw. They were attracted. They were attracted to black males. Just within their nature. That's why I said earlier. I think you missed this part where if you go into European culture, just Romanized culture. Romanized culture is pretty much males and males having sex. The only reason why they used the woman is to have another child. They wanted another male child mentally to have sex with again. They wanted to keep pushing that. They wanted to keep having male on male sex. In their mind, it was normal to them. That's just what they did. That's just, there was no reason. There was no logical reason. In their mind, it's logical because all they wanted to do was just have sex with a black slave male. That's just, they were attracted to it. That's what they like to do, But in so doing, them, not to get too graphic, them basically seeding themselves within that male, that was defiling the genes. As I said earlier, that male is being raped, so he's taking on the complexity of what's raping him, and that's carrying over to the woman that he may be having sex with and having a child by, and this is going on. I mean, remember, in slavery, we didn't have any control of what we were doing at all. If we wanted to have a child, we had to be paired up with somebody. We didn't have any wives or anything like that. We had children. A lot of them that they may have came over here from Africa, but when you're dealing with slaves, one of the main reasons for slaves was to be breeders. This was going on not just after the end of the slave trade. This was going on for years. They needed to make more slaves. So they started to, whenever they wanted to have, mentally, they wanted to have another slave. They wanted to make a stronger slave. They would take the male that they felt was the strongest and take the female that they felt, both in their mind is attractive, so they're going to have attractive kids. But they were having sex with both because they were attracted to both. Slave masters. They were attracted to both the males and the females. They were pairing them up. This was, they felt in their mind, they thought they were scientists, but they were doing these different type of acts with both the male and the female for years. And it's a serious situation. This is just what they did. That's why I said I want to go back again. This is going to be a class. I'm going to reiterate a lot of things that I said before. Again, they said within their Roman armies, the best soldier that you can have is the one you sleep with. This is a Roman saying, not an African saying, not an ancient Kemet saying, not a Nubian saying, not a Sudanese saying. This is a Roman saying. The best soldier that you can have is the one you sleep with. They were around each other they loved the fact that they were around male counterparts for months at a time during, times of war with other European cultures and some African cultures when they were trying to finally take over Egypt completely and completely make it Europeanized. So, yeah, there was tons and tons of sodomy going on, tons and tons of oral. That's why I say homosexuality is the physical act, whether oral or anal, of two people of the same sex having sex together. That's all homosexuality is. Okay? And that's, just to answer your question, it was just because they were attracted, that's what they wanted to do. That's why I say population-wise, if we take black males and white males or European males, we're going to see an overwhelming amount of the tendency of homosexuality in the European as even less in the African, than in the African. Even though it's in our genes now because of what we've been through with the European, you're going to see it more still with the European. That's why I say, but
sorry. So from what you're saying, are you saying it's in our genes because based upon what has taken place during the times of slavery, that gene is now tumbled into the current generations?
Right, because when I broke down the he and hermaphrodite gene earlier, I was trying to get rid of that, which is what is taught in Wu-Nuwaupu. That didn't create a need for a male to have sex with a male in the African mind. That was just because I realized the he and hermaphrodite gene was not a dominant situation going on. It wasn't a lot of tribes of them, but it was a tribe of them. What we were trying to do was get rid of them. But during that situation, you're going to have defective situations. Of course, when you're trying to scientifically get rid of something, you're going to have defects. But within those defects, you have a male that might manifest but have a female mindset, or a female that may manifest but would have a male mindset. Thus, you have the XYX and the YXY. The only problem is, to clarify this, a lot of people have the perception that when this happens, someone that has a imbalancement within masculinity and femininity, that's supposed to automatically make them want the same sex, and that's not what was going on. They were just, they just had an imbalancement of, again, femininity and masculinity, just feminine energy and masculine energy. It was an imbalancement. But they did not want of the same sex together. They did not perform, and there was no evidence of any homosexuality in Africa at all, again, prior to specific points in time, prior to specific points of any dealing with any Europeans. So, yeah, it's we have to be able to, again, when we're dealing with homosexuality, and we have to realize this is a form of genocide within our people. Feminization is a form of genocide. We have to put things in its context, otherwise we'll run with anything going on. When you have more homosexuals in a culture, you have less babies being born. Okay? If I'm a homosexual male, and I don't want a woman. I don't want any kids. I may adopt one, but there's no birth. There's no birth rate. There's no birth coming out of this. Whereas if I'm a male and and I'm attracted to women, I'm gonna want to have a child. That's just natural for us as African people. But if I can force this culture coming on to us now with the women wearing it, with the men wearing the dresses, and they can, because you got to realize, think about this for a second. Men usually take on certain things that women tend to like, because the first people that they had to get to like homosexuality in black culture was the woman first. That's why at certain points in time, let's say 15, 16 years ago, you had a lot of bisexuality going on with a lot of women. And so still within for males, we're like, we're not dealing with that, we're dealing with homosexual stuff. We men, we're doing that faggot stuff. We don't deal with that type of stuff. We're not gay. That wasn't homophobia. We just didn't deal with it. It wasn't natural for us. And so they a lot of these things that we took on over the years and over a period of time, that was based on propaganda. So we took on different cultures. We took on bisexuality. We took on these different things. But if I'm going back, because people try to say now that, and of course it comes up, but it's a very less percentage of black women being lesbians as opposed to white women being lesbians. Again, this is a European male. It's like two of the same sex liking each other. Again, is more natural for the European than it is for the African. Okay? Of course, I'm not saying that there isn't any bisexuality going on. It may not have been going on in ancient Egypt or ancient Kemet when you're dealing with the African woman. You have to also put that in its context and think, okay, what was the reason for this? We have to find out what was the reason for this, because again, as we know scientifically, two women coming together cancels each other out. There's no continuation of anything. If a woman and a man does not come together, there is no children. And if there's more of this going on, there will be less of us existing. It's the numbers again. Put everything in its context, and you realize it's all about population control. Again, if you're dealing with an African from not just, let's say, me and you, but then you take it to the Latino culture, they're connected to us as well. Okay, that was still, from Panama to Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Haitians, they're still African people, so that increases the numbers. Then you go into Brazil, South America, and you connect to Africa, and good parts of the Aboriginals. In Australia, we're the dominant gene on the whole planet. We're like 80% of the planet. A good 10% is a good amount of the Asians. But then you have the 8% of the planet, which is the European. He only compiles 8% of the planet. That's why they rarely get out. European males rarely get out of the United States because that's their comfort zone. They have that because they have the United States population very controlled. Okay? That's why they don't like to travel outside of their barometer, because that's, United States is the Europeans' comfort zone because they control the complexity and the population of the United States, especially with the African. Because if the African was to travel abroad, he and she would see more people like them. That's why if you go into, again, as I talked about earlier, if you go into Africa right now, into African cultures, any part of Africa, you ask them about homosexuality, they look at you like you're crazy. Are you serious?
Yeah.
One example, I'm going to give you another example of how colonialism happened all over the world. You have Tahiti, okay? In the Tahiti culture, they have something called mahus. Look this up. There's a Tahitian culture called mahus where they would take the last male child. If there was no matriarch that appeared at all, there was no woman that if a male and a female came together and they married and they had like at least 7 or 8 kids and they kept trying to have a female child and they didn't, if there was no mitochondria, there was no mother mitochondria that manifested itself, they would take the last male child and they would effeminize him and make that child into a woman. That's why, that's why if you go into Tahiti now, you might see some beings that look like transsexuals. And this is based upon colonialism. So a lot of the things you see in certain parts of the world where Africans are dominant, you're going to see different effeminizations going on because they begin to take on European culture. To effeminize a male is a European thought process, not an African process. And these things have to be put in this context, otherwise you'll have problems. You have people thinking, again, a lot of our people now are thinking that homosexuality is natural, that it's normal, it's just that way. Not for us, not for African people, only for the European. Because if it was that natural, these things would have manifested itself years ago. So they had to make a concentrated effort to push effeminization on our people and say, well, it's not manifesting itself. So now we got to get these niggas to start wearing dresses. As a matter of fact, we got to go from before we get the dress, we're going to need you to start taking on this prison culture. Because if you remember, after the era, the golden era of hip-hop had pretty much ended, we began to take on the prison culture of hip-hop. It began to become more gangster. We started wearing the baggy pants, the pants off the ass. You had the Dre era, the Snoop Dogg era, and this whole gangster stuff, a whole bunch of tattoos. That was taking on the prison system culture. And we know the prison system culture is very much homosexual. And you have a lot of these record companies that invest a lot of money into the homosexual culture, or the prison culture. So they invest money into things like this. So they'll take from what's going on into the prison systems and they will adapt that into the hip-hop culture. So then you see a lot of our brothers at one point was wearing the baggy jeans, the baggy clothes, the pants off the ass, whereas now it's even worse. You got brothers walking down the street, can barely keep their pants up, and they're given an invitation to homosexuality by literally barely keeping their boxes off the crack of their ass. This is still an effeminization culture that having now, not just with the physical part, because there's also chemical warfare with homosexuality, where you're having a lot more estrogen in our foods as well as our water systems. This is a chemical warfare as well to, of course, keep the birth rate at a minus, because you have a lot more of us that are not paying attention to the water that we're taking in, the food that we're taking in. So we're taking in a lot more estrogen in our systems. So you're having a chemical imbalancement as well. That's why that's another reason, another factor that you'll also have more, or you're seeing a manifestation of more homosexuals in our culture, in our black culture, beginning to manifest itself. Because whatever you're taking on in your diet, that's going to be part of your sperm cell. That's going to be part of what you germinate. And if you're germinating defiled sperm and that hits that ovum, you're going to populate defiled beings. They're going to be mixed up as well. So, of course, I realize when you look up, and I've done this research myself, when you look up most of the inner city food and water supplies, a lot of that has a lot of lead, a lot of chlorine, and that destroys the foundation of melanin, which is from the pineal gland. All these things are taking place and taking factors on us, because this is a war that we have to see it for what it is. We have to see it as a war. We can't see things as isolated incidents, and, well, it is what it is, we should take it on, what have you, which is ridiculous, because we're not studying our enemy. And because we're not studying our enemy, we're not seeing what he's doing to us and realizing that he studied us for years. He studied his enemy, so he's found the way to put himself, assuming himself in our culture, and in many ways defile us and cut us off and destroy us. And this is going on to this day, and it needs to be accepted, and it needs to be strategized and figured out a way to push it away from us. But a lot of us are accepting it, even in the conscious community, because it's what you brought, the question you brought is being pushed now, that story. But without further research, it's being taken on as it's starting with Africa first. And that's the problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's true. Because, I mean, I hear a lot of times in the conscious community about how people talk about how it's the homosexual trait is also like something that's a part of your spirit. So, I mean, it gets a little confusing when you talk about that being a part that's like a natural thing. People are born that way. But
right.
How do you explain that?
Right. I would say, okay, explain to me how it's in your spirit. How is it in your spirit to be a homosexual? Are you saying that I have an effeminized spirit? I mean, people come with these type of situations for years. I mean, I've heard it myself, sister. So a lot of it is ridiculous. I was like, okay, I have an effeminized homosexual spirit. Explain this and explain it. See, when people come, the first thing I'm trained to do is ask them the question back at them so that they can see the ridiculousness in what they just said. So you're saying that Africans have a homosexual spirit. Are you saying, or are you trying to assimilate to me that on the etheric level there are homosexuals? So you're saying non-ether beings are attracted to male and male sex. Is that what you're telling me? They have to be questioned like this because a lot of this is foolish. It's foolishness. It's ridiculous. That's me. That's what I would do because that's what I've done to people in the past, and they just had nothing else to say. I said, you're going to sit here and tell me that internally people who overpopulate the earth, at some point, you're saying 17 million years, 10,500 years, however far we go back, you're saying that somewhere in there is a homosexual spirit. There's a spirit somewhere that has an African male wanting to be attracted to another African male. Where? And if you're also saying that God and goddess were attracted to each other, or let's say two gods were attracted to each other, I need for you to give me historical accounts of this. Give me the names. Okay? Gatekeepers. Gatekeepers, by definition, are eunuchs. They are used to go in and out different portals of this planet. I mean, different, not just this planet, but different dimensions. They are not, a eunuch is not attracted to another person of the same sex. Okay? They are what's known as asexual beings. That's what they are. That's what gatekeepers are. They are go ahead.
What, you call them eunuchs?
Yeah, that's another saying for them in modern times was eunuchs.
Okay.
Right, but gatekeepers are asexual beings. They're not attracted, males and males. They're not male. They were not male and male gatekeepers attracted to the same sex. Otherwise, it would be a contradiction.
So they're not attracted to the same sex?
No, because there's no evidence of a gatekeeper going somewhere, having sex with another gatekeeper, sodomizing or oral. The thing is, we have to put things in its context, and it has to be defined. Homosexuality, again, this is another reason to define this again. Homosexuality is the art, not an art. I'm not going to say art. It's ridiculous. Is the act. It's the act of a male and another male, or a female, another female, having sex anally and orally together. It's not a culture. It's a defiled situation because, again, two people of the same sex having sex cancels each other out. Plain and simple. There's no reproduction. There's no reason. And again, gatekeepers, again, are asexual creatures. They don't have the mindset of, say, me and you that wants to populate, that are attracted to the opposite sex. They are asexual. They don't have that mindset. Plain and simple. There's no evidence of it. There's no historical accounts of it whatsoever. Just to clear up the gatekeeper concept.
I see what you mean.
Mm-hmm. As we have to look up, a lot of times, a lot of us, when we're taking on different cultures now, the one thing my father, Dr. York, said is the Negro has still not learned how to look up words. You know, when you're bringing in a culture, when someone's bringing something to you, the first thing you have to do, I'm talking in general, not to you, but in general, you have to be able to look up words. As a people, we don't look up words. We don't put things also in its historical content. So when someone's coming at us with something, we don't ask them, okay, well, when did it start? Because this is extremely important. I may be reiterating myself several times, but it's needed to be reiterated because we need to know, like, this isn't who we are. This isn't us. That's why when I look at them, like, if this was naturally who we were, African men born in this society would not feel creepy about looking at it. If you're seeing a transsexual walking down the street, naturally I'm like, what the hell is that? If it was normal, because European males like, oh, that's fine, you know. What do you have a problem with? Because it's normal for them, but for us, we're like, what is that? That's nasty. You know, it's like, hell, you're a dude, and you're pre, post, whatever the hell you call yourself. If it was naturally spiritually for us to take something like that on, we wouldn't question it. We wouldn't be sitting around like, what the hell is that we just see?
It would be familiar to us.
Exactly. I mean, you got here in Houston, Texas, you got the homosexual culture lives on Montrose. I got brothers that are like, and I have a favorite record store I go to every now and then down there, and I'm like, I feel funny being seen over there. You know, I'm laughing, but it's sad because, again, if we were naturally, you know, if this was a naturally spiritual thing for you, you wouldn't have to question it. You would have to look at it and say, what is this going on? You know, you wouldn't say to yourself like, oh man, it's like I don't know about this. You know, you wouldn't say, like, you might ask a brother or a friend of yours and say, well, like I've asked several brothers of mine, what if you had a child and that child came out homosexual? Like, man, we're going to have some fights. We're going to have to beat that out of them. It might sound ignorant, just the fact that he said that's not based upon any structure, any doctrine. That's natural. Like, I don't want that. You know, it's like that cuts off the birth rate. There's no children coming out of this. Because, number one, a male who's homosexual doesn't desire a vagina. He doesn't desire a vagina. He desires a penis. Okay? He doesn't look at come on. There's no such thing as a bisexual male. That's ridiculous. A bisexual male will be all over the place. That's what bisexuality is. You're all over the place. You want to, in reality, you really try because you want to try anything and be with anybody. That's what that really is. The problem is when you're dealing with, and I'm going to refer everyone who's on this to a specific book. The brother Nwalimu Baruti wrote a book called Homosexuality and Effeminization of the African Male, where the foreword of that book goes into Layla Africa, and he said that us as African people, we have to redefine what sex is, because we've been taking on so much of the European culture, we have no idea what sex really is. You know, from anal pleasure to forms of sodomy to BDSM to being tied up, bondage. All these things are things that European males did to each other back in Rome. And there was no forms of this in Africa. If you want to go into the Min order, M-I-N, if you date the M-I-N Min order or the sex order of ancient Egypt, it still goes back to Ptolemy. There was black Africans doing it, but this was after they took on the culture of the people who changed the complexity, which was the European. That's the reality. The thing is, a lot of us, we take on cultures, we take on ideologies, and we don't look up the historical significance of what the ideology is telling us. Okay? We don't do that. And that is a big problem. I'm not saying go out here and beat up on homosexuals. That's not what I'm advocating. But what we have to do is we have to put things in its content and context and realize that this is not who we are naturally. This is not something that we should be taking on or we should be accepting in our culture. Very few people I've noticed have taken on this type of class because a lot of blacks, based upon propaganda, are scared to talk about it. They don't mind accepting something like this as, well, it's natural, it is what it is. That's usually what I hear. It is the phrase, it is what it is. That means you've accepted something. Rather than fight against it, you've accepted it. So you've accepted that some type of weird historical account that they can't prove that homosexuality started in Africa first, and it did not. Okay, and for you to take on, and I'm gonna go into this graphic account that I went in earlier, hence the term pitching woo. The term pitching woo, which is again goes into the life movie of Martin Lawrence and Eddie Murphy, where this was a prison situation with Bernie Mac, whereas it started in Europe first with the Romans, where they had to have a Roman man he would average in height 5'10", 5'11", and he would take on the European, meaning that, let's say for example, he had to have a European child. Let's say if he was 13, 14 years old, because they liked him young, and he had to be a certain height, because when he bent him over, it would look very odd if he was too short. So in order to break him in correctly, he had to be a certain height. This is historical accounts here. That's why they have the term pitching woo. And they would take on a child. It had to be a certain height. And in order to break him in correctly, he had to be that height. And they would do this to several of the male children in order to get them ready consistently for sodomy. This is in Roman culture.
And this was a normal thing in Roman culture?
Yeah, it was very normal. Again, they, as Romans, they preferred to have males over females. The only reason why they would deal with the females was in hopes of having more male children. They despise females. Europeans despise females completely. They despise them. They can't stand them. That's why they did whatever they could to only deal with to deal with males. Again, to reiterate it, they said that the best soldiers are the ones you sleep with, the ones you have sex with. If you want to really be at war, when you really want to have some type of camaraderie with your fellow soldier, you sleep with them. You have sex with them, whether orally or anally. This is in their culture. So if black people want to accept something like this, try to look up the historical accounts of what you're taking on, because you have no idea where this where this stuff stems from. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous and it's sick. When I first read the information, did my research, it messed me up. It did. It automatically let me know it's whatever signs of someone coming at me with it starting in Africa first, it was time to push it away. And it was also time to question that person to a T, that they had to give some type of real historical account, because are you saying that pitching woo started in Africa first? And if you're saying that, then you're saying that Africans were pedophiles. Okay? And if you're also trying to run with this conclusion that Horus and Set had a homosexual encounter, which is what they're also trying to propagate, then you're saying sodomy started with Africans first, which is not correct, because that story is a product of the Ptolemy Roman invasion. Again, when you take on a whole different group of people, when the complexion begins to change, not only does the physical composition begins to change, but the mental composition begins to change, the whole culture begins to change. They went from the acknowledgement of deity to worship of deity, and not just religious, but sexual. And again, fast forwarding into slavery, the same thing was going on into slavery. Slave masters having anal and oral sex with other male slaves in bondage. Couldn't do anything about it because they were in physical control as well as mental control. So they fought it off, but there's difference in there's movies that talk about this. Goodbye Uncle Tom, that gives you good physical accounts. That movie was literally a documentation of two Europeans coming over to the Americas and writing down what they saw. And there was certain parts in that movie that showed how they took black male children and painted them silver, gold. I know there's some people on this line that knows what I'm talking about, and they were effeminizing them. And these were child sex rings that these slave masters were running, where it was nothing but African children that were painted gold, on the whole body. Painted gold, painted silver, being painted different colors to symbolize certain things, but these were child sex rings going on back in slavery. And next door, you had breeding camps.
What was the significance of the colors on the bodies?
Yeah, I didn't know the symbolism behind the cult. I think it just depends on the value. I'm not sure what the colors may have represented, but it was a lot of them. Like what they would do, they would pair all the little boys together. It was a very hideous situation going on. You had little boys holding hands. Yeah, it was sick. To look at it, was like, wow. This was something that they were effeminizing the little boys at early. This was like their age ranges was from 8 to 13.
Oh.
Yeah. These are classes that, again, a lot of us are afraid to talk about. We want to talk about everything else from reptilians to Black Jesus, but when it comes to homosexuality, we just buck dance away from that situation because we're afraid to offend people. I'm not afraid to offend anybody. It's about truth. It's about facts. If we're not going to deal with truth and facts and historical account, then there's no point in talking about these situations because, again, these are real situations that we are refusing to deal with. Effeminization is something that's going on and it's happening right in front of our eyes, but we're refusing to accept it because we're just accepting their culture, and that's our problem. Big problem, and this is serious. Again, a minus birth rate is not a positive thing. We don't. The thing is, we're not supposed to accept defeat. We're not supposed to accept defeat. We're not supposed to submit to cultures like this. We're submitting to it and we're cooperating with it as African people. That means that we've been beat to the point where we're just saying, hell with this. Give me whatever you got, and I'll take it on, even if it takes away my genetics. And that's what we're doing right now. Homosexuality takes away African genetics. That's the best way of looking at it because the less of you here, you die off. More males having sex, more females having sex with each other. There will be a cancellation process going on, and there will be no more of us that exist. You understand, sister?
Oh yeah. I truly do. After listening to this, yeah, I do.
Yeah. Does anyone have any more questions? Anything they wanted to get clarified? Go ahead, brother.
You mentioned a little bit earlier about the sperm and the egg. I'm just asking this question, just putting it out. So I heard that sometimes, what a brother can consume by eating, wrong foods that may have a lot of estrogen or different chemicals or whatnot can maybe alter his sperm when it enters in the womb. Do you believe in the notion that somebody can be born gay, or is that just some BS and they just some child is trained or just observes things and eventually becomes gay? What's your opinion on that?
It's a very small percentage. meaning that, like I said earlier, it happens, but it's a very small percentage. It's a very small percentage where men are born gay or females are born gay. I grew up around people in the mosque where these, there was very few. It was very few homosexuals because there was no molestation going on. So there was no born gay men at all. None of that was going on. Because of the situation that I just mentioned, dealing with the estrogen, dealing with the diet, and dealing with situations of the European in our genes, that percentile is increasing. But that was a very, prior to connecting ourselves, or prior to having being forced to deal with the European, a genetic population or any type of pop-up of a homosexual or a gay man, that was non-existent. They didn't pop up at all. But remember, anything that you do over a period of time with someone eventually becomes a part of your genes. And then that, when you're dealing with the food and everything like that, of course, it's going to mess with your spirit. Is going to mess with your, it's going to make you imbalanced, of course. But to say, okay, well, look, I'm born gay, most of the time when you're dealing with homosexuality, you got to put everything in its context. You're dealing with a whole bunch of factors. It's also very specific factors. So in terms of being born gay, that is like a 1 percentile, man. It's a 1 percentile situation. It happens. The thing is, it's starting to happen more and more. It's starting to manifest itself more and more because of the things we've been through with this European, as well as with our diet that we're dealing with now in this society. So it's a possibility, but the only problem is it's a very small possibility. The only problem is that it's starting to become more of a possibility because of what we're dealing with in this society. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. That was, you answered it.
Okay. No problem. Then when I have any more questions. Okay. No, any statements or anything like that? Anything? I don't. When I say statement, I don't mean a homosexual encounter. I don't want to hear that. No. Right. That ain't the place for this. I'm not Dr. Phil. This is clarification. This is right knowledge. We got to deal with facts here. But I just realized that dealing with something like this, I just realized that very few people touch this subject. Very few teachers, very few lecturers. I don't know if that's an integration mindset, or they would like this to be who we are. And then if that's the case, then we have to question who's bringing the information to us. It's supposed to be questioned. As my father said, question everything. You have to get to the bottom of things, especially with situations like this. This is ridiculous. I mean, we got warfare in our face every day. We walk out this door. You got warfare on TV. Realize you're looking at parts of homosexuality on TV. Me and my mother was talking about this today. So whenever you look at homosexuals on TV, comparing, black males to white males, when you do with white males, you have the Ryan Seacrest of the world. You got the Anderson Coopers of the world. They're not flamboyant, homosexuals. But when you're dealing with black males on TV, they got to be all over the place. I mean, every show that's a black show has to have a homosexual on that show. Or if it's homosexual on that show, he has to be as flaming, damn near about to spontaneously combust. He's flaming. Just on fire flaming. I mean, high heels and everything. And it's rampant. Okay, it's ridiculous. So that's the thing is they have to make it comforting to black people that this is okay. That's why they had to make it on our shows, from the, especially the reality TV shows. They had to have one homosexual friend, one flaming homosexual friend on each of, damn near every one of the shows has one male flaming homosexual friend somewhere in that show. Then you got the Tyler Perry effect with the Medea. That's a feminization, because the church, because the age range of Tyler Perry movies, in reality, is black females from late 20s on up, and they were able to get black females to be okay with a man wearing drag, and that's homosexuality again. I mean, anybody who studied drag, why would a man want to walk around in the dress? And we started this class again. Why would a man want to walk around in the dress? Medea is not wearing African attire. He's wearing a skirt and a slip. He's very comfortable wearing wearing panties. He's a homosexual. But you're saying in your religion you're against homosexuality. You refer to sodomy. You refer to Sodom and Gomorrah. Male can't. The law of Leviticus, male and male cannot sleep with each other. Deuteronomy, all these different things. But you're accepting a man acting as a woman, flipping over tables, showing his slip. That's okay with you. Mm. You're cool with that. Are you okay? This is me talking to a Christian woman, a black Christian woman. Are you okay with your man walking around with a dress on? Are you attracted to that, yes or no? If you're not okay with that, yes or no, why are you okay with a man on TV as well as the movies wearing makeup, dress, drag? Why are you accepting of that situation? And because these questions get into the psyche of black people, because this is dated. The situations are very dated. And because they're dated, it's nonsense. Put it in this historical content, you're going back to Flip Wilson, one of the main ones who wore drag. And it's like he was more accepted as wearing drag than he was when he was just Flip Wilson. He was more comfortable. They was able to get us to be more comfortable watching him as a woman than him dressed up as a black male comedian. Okay, these are subtle ways that they ease this in. Remember that was in the minority. I mean, you gotta realize they made the most masculine black actor in the world, Wesley Snipes, wear a dress in Tu Wong Fu. Everyone was like, wow.
That's so true.
Wow, when he wore a dress, I'm a little kid, like, what the hell? Like, I'm a little boy, 13 years old, like, ugh. Like, Wesley Snipes, he used to Wesley Snipes just whooping ass. And now he's, throughout a movie, drag. They didn't put, you got Eddie Murphy wearing drag. You have at some point in Richard Pryor in when in his movie JoJo Dancer, he wore drag in that movie. It's very few. The only one who decided not to wear drag was Dave Chappelle. He turned down $50 million to not put on the dress. So just think about how many of us who decided to say, I'm not doing this. You have to walk away from X amount of money. Just think about that for a second. If it really was not about propaganda, why would you offer this man $50 million to wear a dress? I mean, just $50 million for the whole season, of course, but the fact that he walked away from that amount of money, and they knew he had a huge effect on black people. So they had to make sure he wore that dress specifically. Mm. You look at the movie with Martin Lawrence, Big Mama. Right. The last, he dressed, and then you had the young actor that he played in with at the third Big Mama. They made sure they put his young behind in a dress, women's clothes. Mm. Come on, you can't be on TV these days unless you're effeminate, a coon, or you're wearing a dress as a black man. They put us in roles now. They put us in their own context. They created a grid for black men so they can identify exactly where they want to put us. That's why we have to create our own. The homosexual culture literally is basically what you see on TV. That it's okay. I realize you can, in this society, if, as I said before on the Morris class, if I was to assault a homosexual, that's a hate crime. That's federal time. But and this is to say, comparing a homosexual black man to just a black man, that's hate crime. Because the feminist movement, which is, of course, ran by, white feminists, they are very, very much rich. They had, GLAAD, the Gay Lesbian Alliance Against Information. They put the money behind that. But if I just kill a black man, I assault a black man, that's nothing. You can kill a black man today and get away with it. We see that today, of course. Trayvon Martin. But when you're dealing with their culture, you can't touch them. That's a whole different genre of people now. I can be a gay man, and I'm not, but I can be a gay black man right now, and I don't have to be black anymore. I can use the title gay, and I can get certain benefits because of this.
Wow.
This is reality. Now we have to see, and we have to see, and we have to be able to inform our people that this is going on. This is, in order for us, it's something Dr. Welsing said in her lecture. She said that when we accept certain things such as this, we begin to lose respect for ourselves. We begin to lose respect for ourselves and our culture. Because the most beautiful thing in the world is black male and black female, man and woman coming together to reproduce, to keep us going. You got to realize there's a whole race of people who no longer exist anymore. You have 500, as she said, I'm quoting her, 500 tribes, not 500 Indians and Native Americans, 500 tribes of Native Americans who no longer exist because of miscegenation and germ warfare and just wiping out a whole population that was in America prior to Columbus coming over here. And then you had not just Columbus, you had the different Dutch that came over here. So they did a very good job of just wiping out a whole Native American population. At least 95% of them are gone. And the rest of them have just submitted to racism, white supremacy in this society. They just accepted it because they're not going to fight it anymore. Our mindset is to get to the point of resistance. We have to get to the point of resisting. I have to respect myself enough as a man to not wear my pants off of my ass to show my ass to give an invitation of homosexuality. I have to respect myself to a specific degree. That's respect. Respect of self first. Okay? That's the first foundation of anybody. The only problem is we've lost respect for ourselves because of so many things being pushed upon us historically. From drugs, homosexuality, so many different things being pushed in these prisons. We don't have any respect for each other. I don't have any respect for you. You don't have any respect for me. And just like the brother Dr. Valentine said in Hidden Colors, when you're dealing with the status dichotomy and you're realizing that black females are on a certain social status are higher than black males, and subconsciously we're not, we want to get jobs, but we're not getting the jobs that we may be able to want, so we're not being able to be providers. And this, we're seeing just in our household how it's easier to be a woman. They get certain benefits. I might as well just be a woman, and as he said, or at least act like one. All these different things, and these are subconscious. all these different things that are going on. Because, of course, if these are things that we're taking on, the first computer that takes it in is a subconscious mind, and it's computing. And when you take it from the subconscious, you'll begin to act on it in the conscious mind at some point. And that's what's going on today. We've lost respect for ourselves in our society. That's why a culture that is willing, just think about it like this. Also, another factor, just another idea, but it's also based upon experience of what we see. Africans coming over here, when you look at their families, whether it be the Senegalese, those from Ghana, Ethiopia, Nigeria, there's very few men in there at all I've seen, if any, and I've visited a lot of their businesses. You don't see homosexuals in their families, homosexual males. I've looked for that myself. You don't see that. And that lets you know that's a European, it's in America. You see a lot of it, of course, in America, but you don't see it in, on people coming directly from the continent, as well as in Jamaica. You're going to see it more now because of colonialism. But coming over here and them having their own families, you don't see that in there at all. You don't see it at all. People they're hiding it. No, it's not there. And people saying they're hiding it, that means you're accepting the social construct that you're a victim of. It's ridiculous. We just have to be able to have enough respect for ourselves to see things for what it is and resist the propaganda being pushed upon ourselves. And we have to also be mindful of what we're taking in. Because we've taken in so much chemicals, because this is also, as I said before, it's chemical warfare being pushed upon our people, that we have no idea what's going on in our bodies. And it's time to really take a self-check of self and realize, where do we stand with each other? Where do I stand within myself as an African male, as a black man? How do I see myself? If I'm willing to accept this as normal, I don't have too much respect for myself, and especially with my family. If I'm not really paying attention to what's going on, as you have to pay attention to what's going on, because this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Yeah. So this class was needed. It was I'm sure I made sure I did my best to cover every subject that is being thrown out there right now and not being thoroughly checked and being investigated. Because I understand, a lot of times when something's new, it takes a while for us to say, I don't make no damn sense. Let me look this up. And I've been a person that did the same thing. I just accepted certain things, but I don't do that anymore because I have a responsibility to teach the people and make sure that this information that they're getting is factual, and it's not just something that's being accepted. Okay? Before I close, anyone have any more questions or statements or things that they've seen that people need to take or pay attention to?
I got one more thing. It's not nothing like it's positive though. It's just something to point out how crazy that this gay agenda is going on. It's a rapper out of Houston. He posted on his page. I think his name is like Young Fly Red. He has a video. He's a homosexual rapper, but he comes off with like some type of thug image or whatnot. And it's in the name of the video. Someone check it out. It's sick. You may not get through the first minute of it, but I'm not trying to promote it. But it's just something to look at. Yeah. It's called Throw That Boy Pussy. And
wow.
What?
It's pretty damn sick. And but if you look at it, you're just like, damn, this shit is. I'm sorry, I keep cussing. It just makes you think like, man, this some crazy agenda going on right now. So I'm glad you did bring this up. And I know. Well, no, I'm just hold off on that comment. But that's all I have to say.
Yeah. Wow. He said, boy Wow. Okay.
It's called Throw That Boy Pussy. That's the name of the video.
Yeah, I've seen the video. I've seen the video he's talking about too, and in the video it got boys. You know how you got the females dancing. In this video, it got boys with tights on, dancing, and the guy in the middle. I mean, it's crazy.
Oh, wow.
I know exactly what he's talking about. Huh?
Wow.
This is on YouTube?
Yeah, well, it was floating all over Facebook. When I seen it, I had to share it because, like, it's real. Like, what they trying to do is really real. If the guy, he's from Houston. He's a Houston rapper. Yeah, but it was floating on Facebook.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I came in the room kind of late, and the brother was building on. I didn't quite get if you were saying that it starts in the genes, like these homosexual. Is it in the genes, or is it just that they just become that way?
No. I mean, yeah, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you wanted me to clarify that. No, what happened? Historically speaking, homosexuality, defining it, male and male, female and female having sex. That's really what the definition of it is. It started in Europe first. It started with the Romans first. Okay, and because of years of miscegenation with the European, and as well as slavery, what I was saying was what happens is if you're dealing with a situation where something's being forced upon you on a concentrated effort, eventually you're taking on the characteristics. It's like, for example, if a European is sodomizing a black man, and he didn't just enter in, he ejaculated, and this is what they were doing. They were ejaculating into these black men, into these black slaves. What happens is the slave takes on the DNA. Of course, as we know from genetic kids, whatever you come in contact with, of course, by science, you take on the DNA. When what they would do is they would take, of course, during slavery, the main thing that they were doing also was they were creating more slaves because of breeder on breeder. So they would take the breeder, they would take the male, take a female, and they would make them breed. But within that genetics, you had a defiled genetic because of that situation with that slave master. So that's a trait you would take on because it was so much. Because that's just that was one incident, but because of the mind of the European and that being his culture, which is sodomy, homosexuality, it was done so many different times. Yeah, I realize slavery went on from 1492 up until 1865. I'm talking about that form of slavery. So that going on that long, that's almost 500 years. That's almost 500 years of that going on from the West Indies to Brazil to the Americas, and then also colonialism. So, but even then, the fact that it went on that many times, it still did not, until recently, become that much of a genetic factor as it is now, because you're dealing with the situation with the estrogen in the food, which is defiling our genetics, as well as dealing with that raping that took place in slavery. And this is, if you can ever find the book, the evidence of this is also in Our Bondage, written by my father, Dr.York. He clarified this as well.
Okay.
So that's a genetic way that it comes up now, because we've been carrying that trait within us. That's why I say the first devil that you have to confront is within yourself. That European. You got to confront that European genetic within you and find a way to, and the way you do that is because I realize a lot of thoughts that we take on, sexual thoughts, is really not our own. We have to redefine what sex is to us. That's why I also defined, I'm not sure if you were on the class, when I defined the men order, M-I-N, the men order was in ancient Egypt, but it's a product of the Ptolemy era. It didn't start pre-dynastically. It didn't start in the first kingdom, second kingdom, third kingdom. Didn't start in Nubia. Didn't start in Meroe. It started in Ptolemy first. Okay, that's why I say it's genetic in that sense. But most of the homosexuality now really is dealing with effeminization from the loss of the fathers around, from molestation, from the prison systems, all these different situations. That's the majority of the situation. But if you want to deal with the historical account of where it started with the Romans and the Europeans first.
I see.
So do you think that there's some type of... Go ahead, sister, I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I was finished. I was just saying
okay.
I understand now what he means as far as the historical account coming from slavery, and then the food and all the other things that we're getting can feminize black males in modern times. Well, now I understand. No, you can go ahead, brother.
Yeah.
So, what do you think, their agenda is behind this? Why is they pushing it more now? Is it just population control, or is it, would you say is more than that?
You just touched it. Population control. That's why I said earlier. Again, I'm not sure if you were on the.
No, I logged in late. Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, it's the fact that, remember, the census, the real reason for the census was population control after 1790, after the Haitian Revolution. After the European, Napoleon Bonaparte was defeated in Haiti, because if he wasn't, that would have also expanded the Americas also into Haiti as well. After he was defeated, they had to find a means, because during that time of the 1700s, the African was almost at an even amount of population in this society as opposed to the European. If I'm taking free Africans and I'm also taking slaves, we were at a 40 percentile. We were 40% of the population in the Americas. So they created the Census Bureau to find out how many of us were at where. So that's when the slave codes began to pop up. That's when they began to lynch us freely, because we were property, so they could get rid of us whenever they felt like it.
Right.
So of course, when you're dealing with the European mindset of course I want to touch on the fact that when they castrated us, they had to take the testicles off, take the penis off, and stuff it in our mouths, and that was a point of that was them manifesting their penis envy, because they envied the penis of the African, and that's also their form of effeminizing and cutting us off after we were already dead. Remember, remember also, if you do historical accounts and you study the Ku Klux Klan, what they began to do when they first was established, when the Ku Klux Klan was first established, what they began to do was they were breaking free blacks' houses, and what they would do is they would rape the women, they would rape the mother, they would rape the daughter, and they would take the man and they would sodomize the man in front of the woman and the daughter.
Wow.
And this was and they wouldn't even kill him. They were just literally doing this in front of. This is historical fact. They was doing this concentratedly. They would literally, they would rape everybody in the house, but they especially wanted to rape the man because they wanted to put fear not only in the children and the mother, but in that male.
Yeah,
do you think that our kids being taken by them is has something to do with that too? Population control, like the 1,000 kids that's missing?
Yeah. Remember, you can go into Haiti and realize that a lot of those white philanthropists and white liberals, they were going in there and they were abducting a lot of kids because they were trying to infuse with the melanin. And then not just infuse with the melanin, but they just were sodomizing them. And you had different Haitians that were complaining about this, but they were ignoring the situation. Then all of a sudden, they decided to finally figure out, oh wow, these people are doing things wrong. Oh, wow, really? But then you go into, as I mentioned, I want to make sure that you get this. go online at some point, whether it be tonight or tomorrow, look up the darknet, DARKNET. The darknet is something that was established by the European Society to set up a legalized form of pedophilia in this country. And if you look it up, most of the children that they have on this website are black children. When you look up, what's the coach from Penn State, when he first, Jerry Sandusky, most of those children that he was molesting and he was sodomizing were black children. They set up a pedophile ring at Penn State. It's funny how they all got fired. Most of the people got fired, but none of them went to jail, except for Jerry Sandusky because he took the fall. You know, when you look up a lot of the accounts, you go online and look up what was the race. Just put in search engine, what was the race of the kids of Jerry Sandusky, and they have several sites that tell you that these were black kids. You know, you have it's reality, man.
Yeah.
You know, he had a thing for black boys. And they made sure that they didn't put that out there like that. They made sure that they did not put out the information or the faces of the kids that they wanted to say, oh well, we want to make them anonymous. We don't want to expose them like this. But if they would have done that, then they would have shown that it was something that needed to be taken care of. But they don't care, you know, because that's their whole point. Their whole point is to, of course, infuse with the melanin, you know, to make their genes stronger, but yet at the same time get rid of us. You know, because they have this attraction towards black males and, of course, at some point black females too, but an especially attraction towards black boys. To get off on that type of stuff, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's, of course, that's why I tell people, look up the darknet. The thing is, of course, whatever computer you use is going to be into the memory. So when you get on the net, I'm warning you now, when you get on this site, you look at it, it's really, you only should only be on there for 2 minutes. After that, erase the memory, because they take account as of who gets on that site and who doesn't. The moment you click on it, automatically it's in your memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a very vast subject. People think, matter of fact, just to go off the brother that was talking about that video, another video was it was a rapper named Murs, M-U-R-S. Murs, at the end of his video, he kissed a guy in the mouth. Yeah, just outright, just bam. I mean, I was like, wow, like the hell, like it just was like random, you know. I mean, just looking at the Frank Ocean effect, how that's just like stirred up a lot of talk amongst, you know, black people, like, well, he's bisexual. I'm like, well, should we accept this? Well, it doesn't, you know, it was a lot of like buck dancing and not a lot of pinpointing and being a matter of fact about the situation. That look, this is propaganda, you know, because remember, hip hop culture at some point was a very masculine culture. It was just a culture that came out of disenfranchisement and lack of education, but we created it because we needed something to survive and we needed something to relate to each other. Whereas now, hip hop is nothing but sex music and homosexual propaganda. I mean, reality. I mean, you have, again, as I told a brother today, you got different pockets of consciousness. So certain Wu-Tang members, you got Nas here, you might have Prodigy here, you might have the MF Doom, but or Lupe Fiasco, but the majority of it is pushing homosexuality and sex in your face.
Oh yeah.
If you really look at it. I mean,
that's true.
And people would try to say, well, it evolved. No, it didn't evolve into that. That's blue blood society putting a lot of their money into this because they want to change the complexity of a whole race of people. Because again, the more homosexuals you have, less babies are being born. and then you will end up getting into a state of genocide because you have less children. You know, we vary now between 12 and 13%, and we might get to even less because of where we are now. It's too many factors that's going on that's going to contribute to less of us is existing. That's, you know, and why would Barack Obama, if he's for people surviving, why would he push homosexuality more than he would push ending hunger in certain parts of Africa?
Yeah.
That's so true. I mean, him being his father coming from Kenya, Africa, then you should know most African cultures, you know, that's just not in African cultures at all to practice homosexuality. It's non-existent.
Yeah, it is. I mean, a lot of us don't know that. A lot of us are very ignorant to what goes on in other parts of the world. So we're thinking like, oh, they're just hating on homosexuals. I'm like, you as a black person should not have that come out your mouth. If you really knew the historical significance of who you are, you would never say something as ignorant as that. That's ridiculous. Again, I'm not. This class was never meant to hate on anybody else. But the reality of it is this: we have to see it for what it is. We have to start seeing things for what it is. We have to be able to see the agenda and see the propaganda, yet at the same time see the warfare, and see the germ and what the physical warfare. Very important. You know, we got to survive. This is about, we're constantly we've been in survival mode in reality since the late 60s. And we have to get to a point where we accept the fact of where we are, but trying to find a solution to where we are. And one of the main solutions is we have to start populating again. It sounds very simple and it sounds very animalistic, but we have to first, as I said earlier, we have to learn to respect each other, and we have to learn to come together in order for us to not fall victim to what's going on right now. That's reality. We have to be educated as well as what's going on, and that solves the problem, and be educated on health. And as I talked about in a class called the pineal gland, the extraterrestrial molecule, when I was talking about estrogen, when I was talking about fluoride, the main purpose was to get us to not have our pineal gland calcified or destroyed, because all of these things are taking place in these foods, in these waters, and all these things, all the liquids that we're taking in, the food we're taking in, is destroying us. And we have to be able to change the cycle of where we're headed right now, because it's a vicious cycle. But we have to be able to see it and accept things for what it is again, and put it in its proper historical context. Right? Understand, everybody?
Understand.
Understand.